What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the season finale for Alien Earth, an episode called The Real Monsters, directed by Dana Gonzalez and co-written by series creator Noah Hawley, as well as Migitsi Pensano, if I'm saying that at all correctly. In any case, going into this season finale, I was determined to try to keep an open mind because last night I was having a conversation about the show with some friends of mine, and I was articulating and underlining all the flaws as I perceived them, and a good friend of mine was underlining all the strengths as he perceived them. And I was like, you know what? If the season finale is just fucking killer, if it's just terrifying or balls to the wall action or blows my mind with some great sci-fi concept, then perhaps I can forgive all the earlier flaws from earlier in the season if they manage to stick the landing and kind of bring it all together. But I have to say that episode 8 was my least favorite episode of the season so far. My favorite episode has to be episode 5, and admittedly that episode was dominated by a lot of dumb characters making really dumb decisions, but at least it was kind of hardcore and graphic and thrilling and intense and that sort of thing. Episode 8, The Real Monsters, basically asked the question, what would happen in a sci-fi landscape if you were to unleash a bunch of Disney adults to get revenge on all the grown-ups that they hate and despise? It was so annoying and so stupid, and nothing cool happened the entire episode. I kept expecting like the Eye to do something cool or the Xenomorph to do something cool. The episode was basically a series of really bland, boring scenes that exemplified all the problems of the show as opposed to erasing all the problems of the show. And at the very end, when it ended with that line by Wendy or Marcia, whatever you want to call her, she's like, "We're gonna take over," or whatever the fuck she said. I mean, I just kind of threw up my hands in despair, and I could not believe that there was nothing in the episode that would get you excited about what's to come. Like, there was no cool payoff with the Eye. I know that they give us a conclusion with the Eye, but for me it was not a satisfying payoff. And I thought at a minimum the character of Morrow would get to do something totally badass in the final episode, because he's been my favorite character of the season by far. He's the only character in the show that I like, where I feel like he's smart and he's resourceful and he's cool. Like, you could easily see him interacting with characters from some of the other Alien movies, the ones that are actually good. And I've joked in the past about how moving forward, every review that I ever offer for an Alien movie or Alien show is always going to be, oh, well, it's fine, but Alien and Aliens will always be better. And that's what I said after Alien Romulus. But in comparison to Alien Earth, Alien Romulus is like a fucking modern art masterpiece. Like, I'm going to be much kinder in my description of Alien Romulus now that I've endured the 8 hours of Alien Earth, which I feel like is one of the biggest creative misfires that Disney's been responsible for in recent years. As my stepdad used to say, it would have to improve to suck. And now more than ever, I feel like Alien Earth is just one more piece of evidence that Disney is a place where franchises go to die. Anytime they buy a company, that gives them access to some intellectual property to mine, as they say, whether it's Star Wars or Marvel, Indiana Jones or Alien or Predator or whatever the case might be. Like, start the countdown to when they're going to completely and totally fuck it up and make it unrecognizable to the people who once loved those franchises. And I would love nothing more than to be proven wrong, but I suspect that Tron Ares in a couple weeks is going to suck ass as well as Predator Badlands in November. And as I was getting caught up on Alien Earth a couple days ago, a light bulb went off in my head when I realized what's going on in Predator Badlands, at least in the trailer, is very similar to what's going on in Alien Earth, where Disney, in their infinite wisdom, has decided to take the two coolest monsters in the history of the movie business. I don't care like what era of horror or sci-fi or whatever that you like. There are no creatures that are cooler than the Xenomorph from Alien and Aliens or the Predator. But because these are now Disney properties after the acquisition of Fox, they've decided to give female sidekicks to both these creatures, like something that no one has ever asked for or thought about in the last 30 to 40 years. And yet that's precisely what Disney has done. We have Wendy, a.k.a. Marcy, who now likes to coo and whisper and talk to the Xenomorph and facehuggers, and basically looks upon them as like lovable teddy bears or like chihuahuas that pets that she can basically interact with. And in Predator Badlands, we see that the Predator has to team up with like an annoying, snarky, kind of sing-song version of Elle Fanning.
Well, good luck with your journey.
And it's just absolutely bewildering as to why Disney would choose to take the two most badass, hardcore, like sci-fi horror franchises in the history of the movie business and turn them into franchises that are just toothless and clawless, with no balls whatsoever, with no ideas whatsoever. Like, once upon a time, Noah Hawley was a brilliant writer in TV. The first 2 seasons of Fargo I fucking loved. And the first 2 seasons of Legion were incredible as well. I mean, Noah Hawley, he's got the chops, he packs the gear, he's an excellent writer. So what the hell went wrong? I mean, In the absence of specific evidence as to who was making specific creative decisions, like having a bunch of children in the bodies of adult synths, which is one of the most idiotic decisions in the history of the Alien franchise. And there have been some doozies, like we saw in Prometheus, when Charlize Theron is running in a straight line as the ship's rolling after her. But by far the most annoying problem, most persistent problem of this season is that we've been expected to root for these children in adult bodies, and I hate each and every single one of them. And at least we got to see one of them get taken out by the aliens a few episodes back. That was very satisfying. And I shouldn't watch a show hoping and praying that the heroes of the show die by acid or being consumed or whatever the case might be. At least this final episode of season 1 could have done us the courtesy of killing off a few of the more annoying characters in dramatic fashion. Like I kept expecting Wendy's brother, or whatever the hell his name is. Hang on one sec. Joe Hermit, who's a strong contender for my least favorite character in the show. If the eye creature had managed to jump into his face and take over his body and have a conversation with the CEO of Prodigy Corporation, aka Boy Cavalier, that might have been enough for me to say, all right, well, at least they're leading toward a really interesting place. But instead, with the eye, somehow magically it just like teleports several miles out into the middle of nowhere and reanimates a dead body. Well, that's not satisfying. It should have gone at a minimum into the body of Joe Hermit, or perhaps gone into the body of the CEO of Prodigy. That would have been interesting, because the entire season, or the last couple episodes, he's been wanting to have a conversation with the eye. What would be a better way for him to have a conversation with the eye than for the eye to go into his face? And throughout the season, I had such high hopes for the eye, because I thought the most ominous and most effective scenes of the entire season or just watching that sheep with the eye in its face, just kind of quietly observing everything going on all around it as it starts like plotting and scheming to start either escaping or killing everybody around it. Those scenes at least came close to capturing the dread of the unknown that we have felt in some of the better entries in the Alien franchise. And the reason I was kind of putting all my hopes on the shoulders, or the lack thereof, with the eye, is that the xenomorph has been so lame and so pathetic throughout this entire season. I never would have thought it was possible to drain all the fear and all the anxiety out of the xenomorph, but this show managed to crack that code. Like, rule number 1, never put a xenomorph in broad daylight, like running around in the jungle. Like, a xenomorph should always be blending into like hydraulics or tubes or whatever the case might be. It should always be around like barren planets and or technology where it can kind of blend into its environment. Nothing makes the xenomorph less scary than having long, lingering shots on what basically is like a guy in a rubber suit standing in broad daylight. It's like, that's the first rule of horror, is brief glimpses and use shadows so you can't quite see just how clunky the special effects might be. And in 1979, they managed to pull it off. And obviously the technology has come a long way since then, but the craft and the skill and the artistry has completely atrophied, at least when it comes to some of these people working for Disney. And now that we can see the season in its totality overall, where we can see which storylines paid dividends or none at all, or which storylines just went absolutely nowhere, the only lingering positive I can say about this show is that it looks expensive. Like, they spent $250 million making this show, and you see most of it on the screen. It's got big time special effects, big time production design, and that sort of thing. And it looks and feels like an Alien show or movie here and there in brief little moments, but it always gets ruined anytime somebody opens their mouth. The moment the character starts speaking or making decisions, everything just falls to pieces. And I feel like one of the biggest failures of this season overall is that so much of the plot hinges upon stupid characters making stupid decisions. And there are way too many characters that are constantly acknowledging their ignorance or their naivete or their stupidity, like that one knucklehead in episode 5. But I could forgive one knucklehead throughout the entire cast, but they have like 7 or 8. And it's just so infuriating watching dumb people doing dumb things. Like, when you watch Alien and Aliens, it's full of professionals and people who are highly competent and highly skilled at their individual tasks. Like, even Bill Paxton in Aliens, everybody likes to talk about him saying like, oh, game over, man, game over, and all that stuff. But when it's time to go to work, he's like, stop your grinning and drop your linen. I found them. Like, he actually is good at his job. And in combat, he's hell on wheels. Every single character in either Alien or Aliens, whether they're good or evil or somewhere in between, they're all fascinating. Like, you wouldn't want to see any of those characters removed from the story. I love them all dearly, even when they're being complete and total diabolical pieces of shit. And obviously, I'm holding up this show to a very high standard, but that's what happens when you name something Alien. People start to remember, oh, Alien, strong contender for the best science fiction movie ever made in any era. This better be good. Or Aliens, strong contender for the best fucking action movie made in any era. They are 2 of the most entertaining movies ever made, which I've watched many times over. But I feel like the best Alien movies all came in the 20th century. Like Alien 3 and Alien 4, or aka Resurrection, those movies are deeply flawed in my opinion, but I've seen them both many times over. I saw Alien Resurrection, I think 3 times in the theater, or at least 2 times in the theater. I mean, I was a big fan of Alien in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, even though I didn't see Alien until about the mid-80s. In any case, it's one of the best franchises ever. But in the 21st century, we've been given Alien vs. Predator 1 and 2, Prometheus, Covenant, Romulus, and now Alien Earth. What is the best of those? Maybe Romulus. Like the first half of Prometheus for me is very satisfying, and then characters start saying and doing really stupid things. Like when a guy's like trying to pet this little like snake creature and ends up crawling inside of his suit and taking him out. It's like, yeah, that's what you get for playing with strange monsters on a strange planet. And in Alien Covenant, the only scene that I really like is when we see David going back to the planet with all the engineers and unleashing his technology on them, and they're all just kind of rotting and decaying away. I was like, God damn, this is almost a little bit too hardcore and too scary, even for my taste. Alien Romulus has some great production design. I feel like the first half of Alien Romulus, at least like it sets the tone or the vibe, in spite of the fact that most of the characters in that movie were pretty terrible. Like the more I think about Alien Romulus, the less I like it. Or at least I was saying that until Alien Earth came along. I have to say, I think Covenant's probably the worst of the bunch. Then Alien Earth. Then like Prometheus and Romulus might be in a tie, but even though Alien vs. Predator and Alien vs. Predator 2 are just dreadful. I mean, they are just like pure schlocky B movies, but there's something that I can kind of admire about making a schlocky B movie where there's no pretension of any kind. They're not pretending like it has like significance. They're not talking about like the evils of capitalism or anything like that. They're just showing aliens and predators fighting, and like it knows those movies know precisely what they're trying to be, and they're not aspiring to anything greater. But you can tell the writers and the directors behind Alien Earth are taking themselves very seriously, and I always find it a little bit hypocritical when any show or movie created by Disney tries to lecture us about the evils of greed or capitalism. I'm like, Disney is the ultimate soulless corporation where everything they do is in pursuit of the mighty dollar. And I'm sure there's some Disney adults out there that would push back on that characterization and talk about all the wonderful, beautiful things that you can experience at the Disney parks. But I feel like you are fooling yourself. Disney wants your money, and that's all they care about. But I'll give Disney credit for this. They at least are willing to put their money where their mouth is, and they're willing to spend big time on shows and movies if they think those shows and movies might pay off. Once again, they spent $250 million on this show, and I kept thinking to myself, what would have happened if instead they'd made a trilogy of movies with $80 million per movie? Because I think Alien Romulus had a budget right around that, like $80 or $90 million. And there were people out there who really did enjoy Alien Romulus, and it was modestly or moderately successful. But I feel like if Noah Hawley had permission to make an R-rated trilogy of Alien Earth as movies, perhaps we'd be having a very different conversation. One of my biggest complaints about a lot of the franchises and movies that try to make the jump to TV is that ordinarily a season of TV these days, it basically just feels like a feature film that's kind of elongated and stretched out with a little bit of padding to make it feel like an 8-episode show. But it's like, I'd rather just watch, like imagine if they'd taken just the best scenes and the best moments from Alien Earth, and instead of giving us an 8-hour show, had just given us a 2-hour movie. It might have been totally badass. And if you're forced to obey those kind of narrative constraints, or like the constraints of the length, like nothing stupid's allowed to be included in the story, or at least you're forced to make some hard decisions about what is included and what is not. And yeah, I just feel like everybody involved in this show, they just had way too much time, way too much money, and it was just a complete and total missed opportunity. And I could go on and on with a long list of little petty grievances, like crummy physics in the show. Anytime Wendy jumps off anything, whether it's a cliff or down into a tunnel, the physics of the jumping and the way she lands just looks totally artificial and inauthentic. Or when you see acid on metal, when it's digital acid, it just looks fucking terrible. Like, how come in 1979 they were able to do acid so much more convincingly than in 2025? Or how come Disney always feels so compelled to insert these omniscient, omnipotent female characters into all their franchises? Because Wendy, while the actress playing her might have some admirable qualities, the way the character's written, she can talk to all the aliens and manipulate their behavior, and now she can talk to all the machines and manipulate their behavior, and she's basically in a nearly indestructible body. Like, that's fucking boring. They should have at least given her some kind of erratic, unpredictable qualities by virtue of the fact that she's a child in an adult body, just to make her a little bit more unpredictable. But the character of Wendy is so fucking boring that it just makes me dizzy even talking about her. And in all the decades of watching alien movies, they never said, what if the xenomorphs are just misunderstood little puppy dogs? What if they just need a friendly face to coo at them and purr at them and pet them and treat them real nice? Maybe they can just be like our lap dogs and obey our commands. It is completely, totally ridiculous. The xenomorphs should just be killing machines. They should be fucking terrifying. Like, little kids around the planet should go to bed at night, like, pulling their covers up to their face, crying in terror that maybe one day a xenomorph might come looking for them. And this show has managed to bleed all the fear, all the terror, all the threat out of the xenomorphs. And I don't know if this franchise can ever recover. And I haven't been following the numbers too closely in terms of how well this show is doing or how poorly it's doing in the ratings. But I think it's safe to say I will not feel compelled to watch season 2 if Disney decides to pull a trigger and renew it for a season 2. I've never wanted the Alien franchise to basically be turned into like a lighthearted children's adventure movie. This whole Peter Pan motif, I just can't get over it. Just watching adult actors acting poorly as children, because one of the biggest flaws that persists throughout a lot of Hollywood are screenwriters who try to write in the voice of children and can't do it. And it's why we see so many movies where you have really annoying children where you just spend the entire movie waiting for them to be eaten by dinosaurs or killed by aliens or whatever the case might be. But most Hollywood screenwriters don't know how to write children. They either turn them into brats or they make them precocious adults. But I never thought that children in Hollywood entertainment could get any worse until now, where we have adult actors pretending to be children, which somehow is just like the holy grail of everything I hate about Hollywood being stirred into one show. So my apologies to my friend that I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I was going to try and approach this episode with an open mind. If the episode had been amazing, and if Timothy Oliphant had done some badass shit, and if the character of Morrow had done some really cool shit where he managed to get the ultimate payback or ultimate revenge, where he got to do some really hardcore shit like we saw earlier in the season, well then perhaps I would be offering a more favorable review of this season finale. But like I said at the beginning of the video, this was by far the worst episode of the season. So going into the show, I thought I was already suffering from a pretty pronounced negative bias towards Disney and everything they create, but this show has only intensified my hatred. It reminds me a little bit of the title of a book about the rivalry in college basketball between Carolina and Duke, but the title of the book is "To Hate Like This Is to Know True Happiness Forever." I feel a little bit like that when it comes to Disney. And it's only because with almost like single-minded determination, they just keep destroying things that I love. Even little things like when they acquired Fox, they decided in their infinite wisdom to censor the movie The French Connection, one of the most beloved movies of the 1970s. And luckily I have a Blu-ray from before the Fox acquisition, so I have the uncensored version. But it's like everything Disney touches, they just turn to shit. And I'm going to try to end this video on an optimistic note, but with a little bit of mean humor. We live obviously in very divided times, whether it's culturally, politically, or whatever the case might be. People are always fighting about all kinds of stuff. Like even like right now, Disney's at the heart of this culture war where half the people out there hate Disney for taking Jimmy Kimmel off the air, and half the people hate them for putting him back on. But I'm going to begin a cause where I think we can solve all the world's problems and get over all of our differences if we all just join hands and unite in our hatred of Disney. And I know there'll be some Disney adults who will push back on this movement that I'm going to try and create. And you can keep your theme parks, you can dress up like Minnie Mouse and go enjoy Disney World or Disneyland or whatever the case might be. Like, have at it. I won't stand in your way. But when it comes to their handling of classic franchises or classic movies, I think there's abundant evidence now that everything Disney touches turns to shit. And Alien Earth is just yet another example in an ongoing trend. And I've got early access tickets to see Tron Ares, a franchise that Disney created. We had Tron, and then we had, what the hell was the sequel to Tron? Tron Legacy. And I was 6 years old when Tron came out, so I've got a lot of sentimental love and affection for Tron. And once again, Disney owns Tron. They can do with it whatever they like. But my anticipation for Tron Ares is starting to plummet, and my anticipation for Predator Badlands is also down in the gutter. So I guess the good news is there's nowhere to go but up from here. So who knows? Maybe Disney's going to start a major comeback where they're gonna fix Indiana Jones, and they're gonna fix Star Wars, and they're gonna fix Marvel, and they'll fix Alien, and they'll fix French Connection. They'll fix everything that they've screwed up in the last couple of years. But I am deeply skeptical. So I think that's all. This is the end of my temper tantrum. And once again, I went into this video thinking I was going to try to say a few nice things, but then I just got carried away in my unbridled hate. It reminds me a little bit of when somebody accused me recently of being a Star Wars hater. I was like, I'm not a Star Wars hater. I just hate Star Wars. And when I say that, I mean I hate Disney Star Wars, because obviously I fucking love Star Wars. Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. I mean, who doesn't love those movies? If you don't like those movies, I don't like you. And so when people say you're a Star Wars hater, I'm like, no, I just hate everything that's been done in recent years. And when you see the trailer for The Mandalorian and Grogu, I mean, that dropped yesterday? Yeah. And it just landed with an absolute thud. We're like, nobody's talking about it. It's not trending. Like, there's zero excitement. There's barely even any excitement amongst like the Disney diehards who like anything with the Disney logo on it. And something's just deeply wrong over there. And I just feel like it's been a pleasure this year seeing Warner Brothers doing so well and enjoying such a hot streak, because it just shows that, fun, entertaining movies can still be created by Hollywood when they put their mind to it. But it's just not happening at Disney at this time. But I think at this point I've said all that I need to say. Hope you at least found this negative rant interesting to a degree. But if you disagree, by all means, let me know down in the comments below. Like I said before, one of my dearest friends likes this show and was pushing back on my assertions last night. So I'm prepared for the fact that some people will disagree, which is totally fine. In any case, if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.